Joining us now, we've got Caleb Silver, Editor-in-Chief, Investopedia, to take a look at a pivotal week for the market. We've got earnings in focus. We've also got news on investor sentiment from the Investopedia's latest survey. But before we get into that, I want to talk big picture for this week. We've got a lot to chew on this week in terms of earnings, although tariffs have obviously been top of mind. But still, we can't ignore what's in front of us. What stands out to you in terms of the earnings that we'll get this week?
Yeah, you're going to look at this first quarter and say that was the best it's been for a long time. It's not going to look that good going forward. And you can see it in the estimates. Blended year-over-year earnings growth for the S&P 500, 7.2%, pretty good. That'll be something like 7 straight quarters of year-over-year growth. The issue is that that's kind of the high water mark, and it's been coming down quarter after quarter for the past 6 months or so. So you got 71 companies reporting actually a positive EPS surprise, 61% reporting a positive revenue surprise. You always see that around earnings season. Are people paying attention to that? They want to see companies with really sound balance sheets right now, really strong fundamentals. Only 2 sectors, though, reporting higher EPS forecasts, just because we're seeing this downdraft in profit growth, and you're probably going to see more of it later. The forward PE ratio is still 19, though, for the S&P 500. That's relatively high, but it is lower than the 5-year average of around 20. So valuations have come down, but company profits are also coming down, Diane. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Mag 7 and how much influence that will have this cycle. Yeah, huge. Expected earnings growth for that group is around 14.8%. When you look at that as a group in the S&P 500, the remaining 493 companies, that's only 5% earnings growth for them. So they're still driving the earnings growth. They're still driving the volume in the stock market. But EPS growth for the Mag 7, about 16%, 15.9%. That is down from 36.5%. Want to talk about profit compression? You're seeing it in the biggest companies. Why have we had this sell-off? Well, the tariffs have been part of it. But investors have just come around to the fact that these companies are just not going to grow like they used to. And they were growing like crazy the past few years. I think investors have to get used to that fact. Okay, so get used to that fact. But I want to talk a little bit more about the Mag 7. We've got Alphabet in front of us. We've got Amazon coming up as well. How much attention will be on those? A lot, because they've been the drivers of growth. But even Amazon, if you remember the end of the fourth quarter, they reported really weak revenue guidance. Stock got sold off pretty hard there. Only 5 to 9% revenue guidance growth for this quarter, so they have to hit or surpass that. Jassy has been cutting costs for the last couple of years. He's been doing layoffs. They've been slimming down and putting more emphasis into Amazon Web Services. But even that profit growth, which was the profit driver, is slowing a little bit too. So what are you investing in if you're banking on Amazon? Continued growth of web services, right? And their ability to continue to be a good advertising mechanism in a really tricky environment. So watch that one really closely. And then look at Alphabet. We had that massive U.S. District Court ruling last week, antitrust. Are they going to announce some sort of a spin out here of the ad tech and the ad serving part of the company? Don't forget, Alphabet is an advertising company. YouTube, Google, advertising delivery mechanism, super effective. If they have to spin that off, what does the company look like going forward? They might not, but we want to be listening for that. Yeah, that was certainly a headwind for them. Let's talk a little bit about your latest investor sentiment survey. How are people feeling? Yeah, the vibes are tough right now. People are as cautious and as worried as they've been since we started this, and we started this pretty much right after the pandemic about 5 years ago. So they're as worried as they've been in a long time. 44% say they're extremely worried. You got 38% saying the sell-off has impacted their retirement plans. You take a 10% hit to your portfolio when you're 55, 70 years, 60, 70 years old, you start to rethink that calculus a lot. 17%, though, say they took money out of the market since Liberation Day. That's not that much. But 30%, Diane, say they've been trying to buy the dip, trying to catch the falling knife. We know how dangerous that has been this round. Usually, buying the dips has been a pretty successful strategy. Not lately, especially with the biggest stocks in the market. Both sides of that coin kind of feel tough to just take money out of and as a knee-jerk reaction to Liberation Day, or as Jay Woods calls it, T-Day. At the same time, the trying to catch a falling knife, that's it, because no one can call the bottom. No, I know. And it's two different types of investors. Right. You can tell it's the older investor that's like, hey, okay, I've had enough of this for a little while. Let me play it a little bit safe. Let me put it in cash. Let me put it in the coffee can. Let me put it in a money market. I can still get 4 or 5%. And then you got the promiscuous investors, self-directed, who say, that's a big sell-off for an NVIDIA and Amazon, for the Mag 7, for some of their favorite stocks, so they've been buying them. But they're so faithful, our readers, the Investopedia self-directed investors, so faithful to the biggest stocks in the market. We ask them what's in their portfolio right now. Looks just like the NASDAQ 100, looks just like the top of the S&P 500. We also ask them, Diane, what stocks would you buy and hold now for the next 10 years? the same stock. So they are piled in to the biggest stocks they've owned for the past 10 years, hoping that somehow they're going to recover. I think when you give them this earnings season that's coming up right now, we're going to learn a lot about that recovery.
Okay, so it's interesting to see that investors are worried. That kind of matches the sentiment we've seen from overall consumers and CEOs, the C-suite as well. All right, that's Caleb Silver, Editor-in-Chief, Investopedia, with great insight on both how investors are feeling and what to expect in the week ahead for earnings.